I might have to get yourself or somebody else to give it a try.
I was going to say
again.
No, it says it started.
Yep, excellent. This time it started. Okay, so welcome everyone to our April 2022 Power Platform Community User Group. Just a reminder that the webinar is being recorded, so if you don't wish to be recorded, then wait until we finish recording at the end if you want to have a discussion with everyone, because we will be having a little catch up at the very end. Also, if you haven't joined our community yet, just hang on a second. For some reason, my screens aren't moving on, so I'll just move on the screen. Okay, so now we've got our welcome. So if you haven't joined our community yet and like to get involved in the discussions that are available, we've got our shortcut here and the QR code. I'll just leave it up for a few seconds, but you will get some other opportunities later on in the meeting if you miss this opportunity to scan the QR code. So just as a reminder that if you do have some questions that you miss out on during the webinar, you got that opportunity to join our group and join the discussion. So you can raise your own questions for the rest of the community to see and respond and be part of the group. So be sure to join up. So our agenda for today, after I do a quick introduction to who the presenters are, we'll have a go through some Power Platform news, and then we're going to get into the main part of our webinar, which is a couple of presentations / demonstrations on useful things to do with the Power Platform. Then hopefully we'll have some time for a little bit of general question and answer at the end before we turn off the recording, and then everyone is free to join in unrecorded at the end and meet and greet each other and have further discussion. So firstly, the presenters, myself, I'm Bill Mallett. You can see my qualifications here, and I also have certifications in the Power Platform. You can get me at bill.mallett at the msftcommunity.com email address. You also have Andrew Gallagher, who you can get hold of at andrew.gallagher1 at the msftcommunity.com, and Yeoman U as well at yeoman.u at msftcommunity.com. And the one common thing amongst us all, we're very passionate about the Power Platform and wanting to share our knowledge and help grow use of the Power Platform. So that brings us on to our April 22 Power Platform update. And I believe Andrew has the first lot of news for us.
Thank you, Bill. My news that I want to talk about is that Microsoft are introducing DLP, or data loss prevention policies, into the Power Platform. Now, we've been using this in Microsoft 365 for many years, basically to protect company data. In Microsoft 365, we do this in emails. Basically, if an email has got a credit card number in it, or a driver's license, or any personal information, the DLP policy will block that. So in terms, your organization's data is likely one of the most important assets that you're responsible in safeguarding as an administrator. And in simple terms, for the Power Platform, the DLP policy is a data protector. You can create a DLP policy that can act as guardrails to help prevent users from unintentionally exposing organizational data. And these policies are created in the Power Platform Admin Center, Now, what in the Power Platform do the DLP policies affect? Pretty much, they affect two things. One is our Power Apps, Canvas apps, and our Power Automate flows. And Microsoft do this with three classifications. There's a business classification, a non-business classification, and a blocked classification. So the business classification is basically our SharePoint data, Dynamics data, OneDrive, Forms. So everything within our Microsoft 365 tenant. Our non-business classifications are basically for social media, such as Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. And then our third classification, which is quite new, is the blocked, is any connectors that you want blocked so no one has access to them. Now, you cannot mix and match between business and non-business classifications. And the reason for this is that Microsoft don't want you to accidentally tweet, for example, confidential information from your SharePoint or Dynamics system. Now, what we're trying to do here is prevent a user from accidentally sending out data that you don't want sent. So now these policies, so it's very important to know that there's no policies or DLP's policies on by default, so they must be created. The DLP policies are scoped at the environment level and tenant level, and the environment DLP policies cannot override the tenant DLP policies. Now, if you've got multiple policies in one tenant, the most restrictive policy will apply at all times. So just as summary, the policies are put in place to protect users from sending out confidential information accidentally, and it blocks the connectors from doing so. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to Yeoman, who's going to talk about our Power Automate desktop built in Windows 11.
Thanks, Andrew. Windows 11 is the fairly new operating system, but more exciting is, if you remember my introduction to Power Automate Desktop in a previous webinar, you already notice how useful that is, and possibly to anything that you do based on what you're doing on your desktop. So that sort of power is now being integrated into Windows 11 natively. So that means that it's really Microsoft saying that you can harness more power out of automating tasks straight out of the box. And as always with Microsoft, they want to push and improve that product more and more over time. So if you remember things that you can do with Power Automate Desktop, you can do basically desktop macros, or you can run routines where you can scrape data from some of your legacy desktop programs that you may still using, like CRMs or accounting systems. So it can automate some of that data entry or importing without creating some sort of error in manually doing so. That should help you do reports better, and there's even now things where you can do automating of file conversions and streamlining those, so you can convert things straight to PDF, or you can launch PowerPoint straight away or an Excel without you having to do too much based on what you set to trigger it, either manually, or if something happens, then if this happens, then launch an Excel, then or launch an Excel spreadsheet, etc. So some of the latest updates they've put in with this in Windows 11 is you can now manage your these flows, these Power Automates that you set up in real time. So it's trying to make it easier to keep an eye on some of these routines, because sometimes they do cause strange behavior for one reason or another. But now there's a bit more notifications that comes through with using the Power Automate Desktop in Windows 11. So you can see what its status, current actions, and you can also have the ability to stop and pause some of these flows that you've created. And all this is provided through some sort of pop-up window that you can see. The other major update is that you can display a custom dialog box or a custom form that you can actually use to actually create or enter input from for Power Automate desktop flow. So those are some of the new features that are part of this new native built-in Power Automate desktop with Windows 11. On that note, I'll hand over to Bill about the community user group update.
Thanks, Yeoman. Very interesting to see. Maybe a reason to move to Windows 11. So just a quick update. You'll notice that we now have the 3 group leaders. Can't see me here, but you can do a view all. We can see us all now. So if you would like to message one of us, feel free to go there and send us a message. Also a reminder to make good use of the discussion area. We haven't had as many discussions since last time, but make sure you get in here regularly and raise your questions. I'm certainly in here regularly to see if I can answer them and put my own discussions in there as well. For those that aren't aware, this month is the first year anniversary of Microsoft having specific user groups, official community user groups for the Power Platform and Dynamics 365. But we're not quite that old. We didn't start until November last year, but as you can see on the screen, we've already grown to 27 members. But the more the better, the more discussion that we can have and the more we can learn off each other. So please pass on the message and invite others to join our group. So that's it for our news then. So the next thing is we get into the main part and do our presentations. And I think Andrew has the first demonstration for us. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Bill. Let me just share my screen over here. Okay. All right. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I wanted to talk about a situation I had out at a client. It was an accounting client, and they were using some automated AI software supplied by a third party called Yeoman. And what that software does is they receive accounting or tax files regularly, like your tax return, and those documents are automatically processed, and the AI picks up the information from the PDF documents and puts it into their system. So the request to me was, can we scan from the scanner or from the all-in-one Xerox printer scanner to a folder that the ATO mate would pick up from? So what you would generally find with a printer is it gives you 3 options. One is to scan to SMB, which is probably what we've done in the past, scan to FTP, or scan to email. Now, one of the problems with the scan to SMB is that most printers, especially if they're 3 years or older, are using the SMB version 1 protocol. Now, as you can see on the graphic that I've got up there, there's quite a few different SMB protocols that have been released by Microsoft over the years. The SMB 1 goes back to Windows 2000. Now, on a security sense, that's a bad thing. And to open that up on a Windows 10 machine, you actually have to go into the settings. And if you've applied baseline policies to protect the machines, then you've got to start undoing that. You're really weakening your security posture by trying to achieve these goals. The same The same goes for the scan to FTP. So when I sort of realized, all right, I'm not going to use this scan to SMB, I'll go to FTP. Well, that didn't really work for me either, because I've got rid of the server. I've moved all of the files and documents and everything up into the Microsoft 365 cloud. So then do I then open and install FTP server on the Windows 10 or Windows 11 client, or do I go off and I get a third-party app such as FileZilla FTP, which a lot of people mentioned on the web? But once again, I then had to try and put holes in my security by opening up ports, modifying firewalls, and changing my Windows baselines to allow for these documents to be scanned in through the FTP. So then I thought, well, how can I do this using the Power Platform? And what I worked out was I could use the scan to email system on the printer to send the emails directly to a shared mailbox. And then I have the Power Platform pick up when or trigger automatically when an email is received into that scan, into the mailbox, into the shared mailbox, and then save that document directly into SharePoint. Now, to send the emails from the printer, I use a product actually called SMTP to go to send it. The reason I do that is I also have closed down POP and SMTP on my Microsoft 365 for security purposes, and I can set up the SMTP to go quickly and easily. As you can see, there's a free version that allows you to send, I think it's a couple of hundred scans, which, you know, for small business, that's probably enough in a week or a month. And that's an easy way to set up the printer without touching any of your Microsoft 365 products. So let's have a look at how I do this. So first off, I've created here a shared mailbox called scanner@gallaghercomputing.com.au. I have then set up a Power Automate flow, which I'm now going to show you what it does. It's quite simple. There's only 4 or 5 steps in it. And basically what it does is it's checking the shared mailbox, scanner@gallaghercomputing.com.au, to receive an email. So whenever an email is received, in fact, I've actually done it. Whenever an email is received with, I could change that with an attachment. So if there was any emails received that didn't have an attachment, it wouldn't trigger the flow. But basically this in its set is just waiting for any email to be received into the scanner mailbox. Once it does that, I have this next step, which gets the email and basically gets the email ID. Now, you may be wondering why this step is necessary. Without this step, I found that the PDF attachment came through and was saved into SharePoint, but it was corrupted. So by adding this step and getting the message ID, it basically fixed the, and it's a known bug without by using that. So this gets around that and saves it. The original mailbox address, scanner@gallaghercomputing, must be put in. The message ID on its own is not enough. You do need to actually put in the email address. So basically, we're receiving our email. And then what we want to do is grab the attachments from those emails, from the email, and save that to a SharePoint location. So we've got our site address, and then we've got our folder path. So if you have a look here, you can see here, I've got a channel, Tony Scanned, which is also a document library. So in my flow, I'm choosing where I want the attachments from the email to be saved. So in the example for my client, Yeoman had specified an input folder in SharePoint. So that was the folder path that I put in to save those documents. We're then gathering the the file name and the content of the file and saving that to that SharePoint location. And then at the end, we no longer need the email, and the email is deleted out of the shared mailbox. So let's see this in action. Let me go back. So now what I'm going to do is, rather than get up and actually scan something, I'm just going to send this test email to the scanner mailbox. So I've just sent that, and I'm going to just have a look here where we expect to see this email come in very, very shortly. Let me just refresh this. And here's our email. It's just been received theoretically from the scanner. And now that email is in here, I'm going to come over here to watch our Power Automate flow. I'll just refresh this, and we should very shortly see a new flow start running. Now they aren't, they do kick off pretty quickly, but they're not always immediate. So I'm just going to keep refreshing this while it picks up the email. It's also important to note that you can actually see here the run history of previous emails that have come in. You can see early on, my flow was failing, and then I got it to work. You can also click on one of the older ones and resubmit it. So if you're testing what's happening and so forth, you can resubmit an old flow. So let's come back here and let me refresh to see whether it kicks. Still waiting for it. As I say, it's not always instant. Box. So my email's disappeared. But no, it's still. Coming along. Okay, I'm going to, while we're waiting on that to take place, I'm actually going to submit this one just to kick one off. And okay, it's not kicking off because it's deleted. Okay, that one failed when I re-kicked the one off that I did last night because the email had been moved into the deleted items. Okay, this is. Let me run through. Okay, so here you can see that the email has arrived into the shared mailbox. It's got the email. It's created the file, the test PDF into the scanned documents, and then what it does is it deletes the file. I'm just going to refresh this one more time.
Andrew, it hasn't already appeared in the SharePoint, has it, as part of it?
Because the flow hasn't run. Let me refresh that. I'm just going to.
There you go. There's your test page.
So. Oh, there it is there. Okay, it took a little time. So as I say, the triggers aren't, instantaneous within a few minutes, let's say. So here is our flow that has run. Thank you, Yeoman. Yes, I was getting a little bit impatient. Has flowed, and if we have a look here, forget that one that I moved. That was the one I moved back. It deleted the original email. So as you can see, what it has done is run our flow, received the email, created the file with all of the information, and you will see that file if I refresh here in Teams. Here is our test page in our SharePoint document library, because I'm looking all at the same thing. And even if I have a look here in my file system, here is the test page PDF that we've sent. So in conclusion, what I have done is basically I am now scanning from my Xerox printer directly into a SharePoint location. I haven't had to open up any firewalls. I haven't had to change any of my Microsoft 365 settings. So all of my security is completely in place, and the email has scanned directly into the folder. You can also set up basically the scan to email, also to scan to people's personal email addresses, and receive those attachments as normal in their inbox. Guys, do you have any other questions?
Andrew, I was just wondering, like, good demonstration. I was wondering if anyone's got any thoughts on how we could take this idea, because it's nice to have a secure way to do something, and perhaps expand on it within their own business or apply it to a specific setting that they're interested in. I'll just give you a few seconds for somebody else, because I've got some ideas myself.
Sure. I find one of the easiest things to set up in those Xerox printers is the scan to email. You basically just have to give it the SMTP address and set up the users or the mailboxes in the address book, and away it goes. I've always had to muck around and fiddle with the SMB version of it, and the FTP. And like I say, to get that to work, you actually have to weaken your networks and weaken your systems. So this way, generally, I sort of find, even though it did take a little bit of time there, by the time the person has hit the scan button on the printer and walked back to their desk, the email is sitting there waiting in the folder. And back to my customer's point in case, the ATO Mate software is also sitting there waiting for the scanned document to appear. And as soon as that appears, its processing goes off and takes place.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about, Andrew, is like, I can see a lot of opportunities for the next step in the process to happen automatically. I can imagine if you're still receiving manual invoices with your deliveries or something like that, you could perhaps have some AI at the other end that's actually reading the invoices and inputting them sort of automatically for you, or some other kind of process like that. So the fact that you can kick it off and start an automation means it gives you the opportunity for the next step in the automation to happen as well.
100%. So basically in the automation here, I am putting it into a SharePoint library. We could potentially remove that step, create a new step, and run an AI action to filter through the PDF document, grab any information, and then either save that information to wherever you'd like, whether that be a SharePoint list, a Dataverse database, or even what Yeoman was showing us, the Power Automate desktop. You could then run one of them to manually put it into your CRM system through a website. Or if the website had an API connector, you could be putting the data directly into the database. But like I say, as the time these flows take can vary. It can vary on basically I suppose, Microsoft's processing load. So, you know, I was expecting that to happen a little bit quicker than what it did. It did last night. Generally, you know, within a couple of minutes, the flows are automatically kicking off. You can manually try and kick some of the flows off. But in my case, where I've got it automatically deleting the emails, when I tried to rerun the flow, the email wasn't sitting there. Yeah, the email wasn't sitting there for it to find it. So,
Well,
yeah.
I found it a tendency with Power Automate is demigods are not usually friendly. And that when you actually not run it in a simulation, like you actually let it run for in real time in the production environment, it actually works so
Yeah.
much better because you're not trying to natively force things as you would do in a simulation like you just did with that. I mean, in my upcoming demo, I faced that exact same issue where you become a little impatient when you're trying to force a simulation, but when actually you just leave it to be triggered correctly in the production environment, then it does actually work quite well.
Yep. And as you can see here, when it actually did trigger, it actually took less than a second to process. But and what I'll just finish up on is that I'm sort of finding that external software vendors, printer manufacturers, scanner manufacturers, they're not worried about the security aspect of people's networks. So in another scenario where I'm trying to get a scanner to work in a Windows 10 environment that have got NDM connected, when I had a look at the old computer, basically it was running on Windows 7 and the firewall to get the scanning working had been completely turned off. Now, in my eyes and in Microsoft eyes, and I'm sure in a lot of other network administrators, that's just not acceptable. That's just opening up networks for ransomware attacks and weakening. But, you know, these third-party vendors, they're not worried about your network security. So it's something that you do need to be conscious of, and finding other ways. And the Power Platform is a great way to change the way we work, to change the way that we receive and accept documents, and maintain the security that we put into our networks. So anyway, thank you all for listening. I'm now going to hand it over to Yeoman. Are you going to take the screen over, Yeoman?
I am. And while he's doing that, I'd just like to express how excited I am to actually try out this solution of yours. Andrew, I have too many small business environments with these older scanners, and yes, exactly the same problem that you've now addressed, in that it's just so much more exciting to create a Power Automate to remove a bugbear that I'm sure other managed service providers for small business clients have, in terms of, well, we've got these old scanners. If it's anything that MSPs will tell you, scanning and printing are the two biggest bugbears they have to face when trying to solve problems for their clients, believe it or not.
And one thing that I find the client looks at a Xerox printer and they go, it's not old. It's still, you know, it still does everything we want it to do. But basically, you know, the BIOS in it or the software that the printer's using is very old, and the manufacturers have stopped updating that. So in the client's eyes, you know, it's just a scanner printer. Why do I need to go off and buy another one? So this way they don't, and all security is maintained.
Fantastic. My demo is actually quite simple, but there's a story behind it. Now, I don't know about other people, but I actually do voluntary work with some charities. In fact, my company is underwritten a charity because my brother's autistic, so we created a association to help people with disabilities, for example, like my brother. So as a result, this charity also runs on Microsoft 365, because if you use if you are a not-for-profit, then you could potentially qualify for Microsoft 365 in terms of using TechSoup, or in Australia we call it Connecting Up. Even if you qualify, you get some free or very cheap Microsoft 365 licenses to apply to your organization as a way of helping not-for-profits and charities actually use secure technologies like Microsoft 365. Now, what this meant is, of course, now that means I've got multiple calendars that I have to manage in different tenants, different Microsoft 365 tenants. Now, that's all well and good, but most people love to use Outlook calendars simply because they can put on their mobile phone or they can access it in any way, and they want to be able to keep basically on top of their planning and their scheduling. And if you work for multiple companies with multiple 365, such as a charity, but you want to make sure that you're not double booking yourself, well, yes, you can juggle two different calendars and two different tenancies, but what if you could actually just use one calendar to at least see it as a planner, so that you're not just double booking yourself that, oh, there's an upcoming meeting or something that I need to handle for my charity, but I don't want it to interfere with my standard workday, or at least be able to book things across them both. So I came up with this idea that maybe I should just at least keep a master calendar, and I would use my work calendar to actually be able to keep on top of both my charity work events and stuff, and also my normal work stuff. So here I have Nesta, I'm going to treat as my master calendar in this case. And I want to put events into here. So I don't have any events in here, but as a demo, we can add our standard events. But what we can actually do is we can use Power Automate to actually push calendar items from my charities calendar, which I'll just borrow Patty's calendar for this exercise. So Patty, let's say one of my charity works here is the current webinar that you're talking about, that we're presenting in. But let's just say that I would like to make sure that any new calendar events that I create here in my charity, a copy is created in my master calendar, so that at the very least, when I look at my calendar and I see planning my day out, then I can see both my events from my standard work, but also actually see any upcoming and new events that I've accepted in my main calendar. Just for overview purposes, I can check on my mobile and go, oh, okay, right. So the way we can do this is actually quite simple. And to do that, you need to go to your Microsoft Power Automate. So if you go to flow.microsoft.com, it will come up and log into your Power Automate. And it's actually quite simple, and it encourages the use of templates. Now, when I'm using Power Automate, I actually can create things from scratch, create flows from scratch, but sometimes I actually come and make sure that there isn't something that I'm not recreating the wheel, or I can use one of these templates that Microsoft and others have contributed to create. Some of these templates, maybe there's a way that I can do it using a template, and that's exactly what I did here. So what I do is I actually go and search for this particular term, calendar copy. And there you go. There's a couple of results. And the first result here is create a copy of an Office 365 Outlook event. So I could actually use this template, because what it actually does is, as it says there, creates a copy. But you can create it so it copies the event to another calendar. So as you follow through with this template, it's a very simple template. You just need to sign into the various calendars that you want to sign into, so the different Microsoft 365 accounts. Now you can see here the first one will be Patty, this particular user. Now I have to create this particular Power Automate from the calendar I want to copy from. So that's why we're here. And the second calendar, as you can see, the red exclamation warning has come up. Now it's going to ask me to sign in, but I can choose to use another account. And so the account that I'm going to use is Mr. Nestor's account, which I'm going to find here. Right. Go, Mr. Nestor. And the password. Oh, this is how you do it secure, which is what I like. And therefore, it's now connecting to both Patty's Patty's Microsoft 365 account calendar and Nestor's Microsoft 365 calendar. So all you have to do is click continue and follow what happens. So what it's done, as with most all templates, it's created the various aspects of the flow or the Power Automate. So what you want to do here is you want to actually really run through all the variables that you need to worry about. The first thing you need to do is you need to check some of these additional things, because we're using a connector that we're actually choosing the right calendar to copy from. So it's asking me, which connection am I using? Well, I want to copy from Patty's calendar, and go away, little help button. And then once I've selected that, then I can choose which calendar. Now, generally you only see one calendar, but some people have multiple calendars, like holiday calendars, other calendars that they're shared with, etc. So we're just picking the standard general calendar. And from here, we just want to double check that we're using the right calendar to actually copy the event, any new event to. So we go Nestor's. And so we select the calendar, and let's show some advanced options. So here you can actually modify some of the variables, and there'll be some that are actually quite important. So for instance, what I like to do is I like to prefix the subject, for example, with, let's say it's the charity, or in this case, I'll just borrow PPCUG, the Power Platform Community User Group. I'll just prefix that in front of the subject. So when it appears in the other calendar, I'll actually be prefixed. Yes, I could use categories. Yes, I can use flags, but by actually putting the text in, when it shows up in your calendar, well, that prefix there will actually say, it's for this particular charity or what other organization. It's just easier to read along with the color coding if you use it. So the other thing that's actually quite important is the time zone of the event. So we're going to just use US Pacific, because this tenancy, both tenancies are based in US Pacific. It's something to be mindful of, because actually I've seen this particular template stop working if you don't select it. And you can adjust all of these other variables if you need, according to your requirements. So I'm just going to keep it as HTML. So I said yes. And all of these other reminders, if you want to put actual reminders in as well, so that when it gets put into the Allo calendar, you can actually put in various things like 15 minutes, recurring, all these other variables. So you can actually play around with this template. But what we're going to do here is we just keep it simple. I like to keep my flows simple and can modify it afterwards, or if I want to put some extensibility, but we actually want to see this in action first. So once that's done and we put all those things in, we'll hit save and see if there's any errors. And it says, nope, your flow is ready to go. We recommend that you test it. Well, of course, we're going to test it. So there's a couple of ways you can test anything with Power Automate. You can hit the test button and it'll tell you what you need to do. So here we can say manually create a calendar item to trigger it, and then we can put the test in. So if we do that, what we actually need to do is we need to go into Patty's calendar, which is over here, and we're actually going to create a new event. So we're going to create a new event for later today. We'll just put it in for, I don't know, we're going to have a meeting at 3:30. And we're just going to put in a title, which is PPCUG. Well, it's going to prefix it. So it's going to test events for C demo. And we could put all the other details in that we wanted to. But what we're just going to do, this is a simple test. We're just going to save it. So it's put that event in there. So what should happen is, if you notice when I come back to here, the flow is running, it's tracking it, green lights everywhere. It's actually created the event in Nestor's calendar. So what we should do is we actually should check that. And there you go. This is Nestor's calendar. And as you can see, it's instantly created it. So it looks like the demo gods I must have borrowed away from Andrew. It's actually worked quite smoothly. So this is at least a one-way pushing of the calendar item from calendars that you have all over the place into one master calendar. So at least you can arrange your day and keep on top of all your various different calendar items from all over the place. So there's a lot of extensibility you can add on to this, but the power here is that all we did was started with a template, and it's a very simple template that already exists, so that you can actually adopt this yourself or it's a really good way to start getting into Power Platform, using Power Automate with simple templates. And it's basically like having a giant DIY kit, and all we're doing is playing around with it. And in this particular case, it's solved a major problem for me, and maybe it'll solve a major problem for you, and just trying to keep on top of your calendars. So on that note, are there any questions?
Thanks. Yeah, while we're waiting for questions, also I've just got a thought for using it. I recently wanted to set up, say, some kind of booking system, perhaps. And I know I've got about 3 different calendars where I can have things booked in. I really see this. I could pull them all together in one booking calendar, so to speak, so that the booking system can see when I'm busy, and I can see from what you were doing that I don't necessarily have to bring the subjects and stuff in. I could just call it busy time or something like that in this other calendar, just so that I didn't get overbooked through a booking system. So that I could really see that working well.
Yeah, like I said, my approach to Power Platform is, let's see how far we can push it, see what's available. Look, when I was a kid, I don't know about you, I got one of these Radio Shack or Dick Smith little kits where you connect little wires together and you see what went. I mean, they came with some recipe books or cookbooks where you could actually see what you could do with it. And wow, templates are just fantastic because it's all pre-done and you just go ahead and check it out and play with it. It's just magic, and that's what really inspires me to always see if there's a Power Platform or answer to this. And Power Automate is fantastic because you can basically pull things apart, see what happens when you put it all together again.
Thanks.
Loving the comments. Lego.
Yes, like your comment. Yeah, good comment. Checking templates. It's definitely a really good idea. Thanks, Yeoman. So if there's no other questions for Yeoman, what we're going to do then is we'll move on to just a general. We've got a little bit of time left, so if anyone's got any general questions and answers, to raise your hand, just unmute yourself, whatever you're most comfortable with doing. Put the question in the chat, and we can just have a little bit of a discussion about anything in general, not necessarily part of the webinar. If you've got some Power Platform general questions or anything else you would like to chat about, feel free to do so. So at the moment, it doesn't look like we got any extra questions. Either presenters want to say anything a little bit more?
What I was going to say, Bill, is it's important to set the expectation of the client clearly. So one of the things that we noticed in today's presentation, both of them was relying on an activity in Outlook, and my one took, 4 minutes, 5 minutes before the automation sort of kicked off, where Yeoman, and I'm very jealous of it, kicked off within seconds. Now, basically, they were relying on the same technology. It's just that there's a lot happening behind the scenes. So, when setting customer expectations, let them know, that, instant sometimes doesn't mean within seconds. It can take a couple of minutes. And as long as, everybody's aware of that and it all works in the end, will all be good. But if the customer's sort of expecting something to happen within milliseconds and it's not, then we get issues.
Yeah, I also liked Yeoman's comment on keeping his automates simple. It's a really good idea to just start with the first simple idea and build upon that. But it also raises that question of, if you don't plan things very well, things can get messy. As you've probably noticed, there's many different ways to do the same thing. So it's probably important always to make sure that you fully understand the customer's need, what they really need to actually achieve, rather than just simply repeating a process or repeating what they might think is the right way to go about it. So understanding need, planning a little bit ahead, but keeping it as simple as possible. I like that as a concept.
100%, because when I was dealing with the ATO mate people, I was being told, oh, you got to do it this way, you got to through SMB. And then at the end of the day, I just said to them, if I get the file into this SharePoint folder, are you happy? Is that all I need to do? And they said yes. And I said, fine, Power Platform it is. What was the other?
It requires some thinking out of the box, and that's what this whole Power Platform experience brings. Is you can bring in an additional dynamic that maybe those who have got legacy world thinking or have been trained or developed in a particular way have probably never thought about. And we're bringing some outside of the box thinking, which is where our expertise in both Microsoft 365 and now Power Platform is encouraging. And you'll see that when you start bringing that into the conversation, then the horizons expand for a lot of people, be it yourself, clients, possibly developers, to explore. Because once you bring that in and you've created a solution, well, it's obvious that if you're going to be in Power Platform and you start doing this, that people are going to refer back to you and go, hey, you're a bit of a wizard. Wave a magic wand and see if we can solve problem X, problem Y, and problem Z.
Or to a point, not everyone even knows about the Power Platform. So yeah, and when I say that, like the printer technicians, you get what I mean? They just know about their printer and so forth, and yeah, so it is a relatively new technology that Microsoft is obviously investing heavily in, and in my eyes, it's definitely the way of the future.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with both demos is you can see how a simple idea can be put in place, actually achieve something, but could lead to bigger ideas. Like particularly with your demo, Andrew, it's kind of a manual thing, isn't it? Scanning a document. So who would have thought, particularly if you don't understand the Power Platform, that scanning a document could lead to a whole potential automated process, or perhaps help you to link into a manual thing that's currently printing out paper, and you can then develop it and start a manual automated process out of that. So simple ideas can lead to quite powerful improvements within a small business, and the tools are all there ready for them to use. Okay, so we only got a few minutes left. So if there's no other questions, we might just move on with like concluding the formal part of our webinar today before we get on to our virtual morning tea. So as usual, our slides includes many resources for learning and interacting together. And something I didn't mention before, but we have plans now to sort of share out the slides and the transcripts as well as the video. So hopefully that will be happening soon after this webinar is completed as well. So you'll be able to get access to these slides. Once again, thanks to everyone for attending today. Thank you particularly to our two presenters today. Very good ideas, simple but very, very useful, aren't they? And here's your opportunity again to join the group. The small link that we got showing here, and also the QR code. So take that opportunity to scan the code and join our group if you haven't already. And so that's brings us to an end to our formal part of our webinar. What I'm going to do now is we're going to close the recording, and then we can anyone that would like to interact afterwards, feel free to open your mics and chat away. So let me go to stop recording. Okay, so